In an earlier episode of 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son, I showed you how to make a puff paste. In this episode, we're taking that puff paste and we're making a wonderful beef pasty. Thanks for joining us today. When most people speak of pasties today, they're generally referring to a meat turnover pastry like these. The most common type of pasty is probably the Cornish pasty, which originates from Western England. But when one looks across a collection of 18th century recipes for pasties, you'll discover a description for a dish that looks not so much like this, but like this. An earthen dish filled with meat and topped with a thick puff paste lid. Now that's not to say that free-form pasties are inappropriate for the 18th century. We'll be exploring these in our next episode, but today I'll be making a beef pasty in a more proper paste. The most common type of pasty mentioned in English cookbooks is the venison pasty, but virtually all other meats were used. Today we'll be using beef. Similarly, most of the pasty recipes call for either neck meat or brisket. And while these are both flavorful cuts, they're also very tough and require longer baking times. Many of the recipes also recommend elaborate methods for tenderizing the meat, including marinating, aging, and pounding with a rolling pin. Today we'll be skipping this in this recipe because nearly all meat today is sold already aged. We're going to use Charles Carter's recipe for the meat filling in his 1749 cookbook, The London and Country Cook. We've started off with a pound of chuck roast cut into 2-inch chunks. We've seasoned this well with salt and pepper as well as a splash of red wine. We'll let this set several hours or overnight so the flavors can meld. In the meantime, you'll need to prepare a puff paste. Make sure to check out our earlier episode on how to make a puff paste. I've made this one ahead of time and I'm going to roll it out to be about 3/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to cut out a circle roughly the size of the dish, maybe a little larger, that will serve as the lid. In the middle of this lid, I've cut a hole about 2 inches in diameter. With the larger scraps, I'll line the edge of the pan, saving the last little bit of scrap for decorations. I'll roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch thick. I'll fill our dish with meat, packing it well. I'm also going to add some grated suet on top. If you don't have any suet, you can use butter instead. About 3 or 4 tablespoons will do. Your decorations can simply be placed on top of the lid. And finally, I'll replace the plug from our hole. Prior to putting this in the oven, I cut some beef bones and put them in a cooking pot, seasoned them with salt and pepper, and poured in just enough water to cover them. This will make a leer or gravy that we can pour into our pasty when it's done. If you wish, you can set this overheat and simmer it until it's reduced by half. If you wish to make this at home, bake it at 350 degrees for 2 to 2.5 hours. Here it is. Here's our pie. It looks beautiful. Pies like this were really expected to be decorated. Let's strain our leer. Now let's pour our leer into our pie. We'll need to let this set for a few minutes before we can eat it. Okay, I can't take it any longer. I really have to try some of this. Excellent. Meat is cooked, it's very nice and tender, perfectly seasoned, and that puff paste really sets it off. This recipe and many others are available on our savoringthepast.net cooking blog. We also have an image reference blog of 17th and 18th century paintings and drawings called siftingthepast.com. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And finally, our online catalog and our printed catalog that has hundreds of 18th and 19th century men's and women's clothing, historical cooking items, and camping items. I want to thank you for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.